Alright, so now we find ourselves at a very haunted cemetery, supposedly. Old man Jeffries used to run a nearby factory. He would beat his workers every single day. One day, his workers had enough of it, and so they locked him in his office, and they wound up burning down the factory and killing him. Legend has it that they buried him right here in this cemetery, and he'll come back to life at the day of his death at a random time and kill anybody that's around. Now, I think this is the day of his death, but I don't see him anywhere around. Do you? Welcome back to Lee's Professional Channel on YouTube, and welcome to Josh's Cemetery Chats. How's everybody doing today? So obviously, the story in the beginning there was a little fabricated. I kind of made it up for the entire video, here. I honestly have no clue if this cemetery is supposed to be haunted or not. It's just one that I've had marked for a while that I wanted to come out and check out. But it kind of makes a little bit of a point too. So last year I did a video talking about urban legends and why urban legends were so popular, why there's so many of them, and it was a shorter video. It was real brief what I was talking about, but I wanted to dig a little bit more into it, specifically because as I've been trying to unravel some of the urban legends for my Legends and Tales series, I've come across a lot of them that are very clearly word of mouth, completely made up, probably were made up just for the internet's sake. And it got me thinking about, why do we have so many of them like that? So before we get into it, I want to say thank you to the patrons. I've got a Patreon set up in case you aren't aware of it. I'll put the names of all the current patrons up right here. And essentially I've got things over there like early access to videos, behind the scenes. I send out postcards and that kind of stuff. So go check it out if that's something that you might be interested in. I also wanted to announce that I've got a new merch shop. I don't have any shirts to wear yet. I've got them to order, and the ones that I've ordered should be here sometime in the next week, hopefully, so I'll be able to show you guys what those look like, or you can just head over there. I'll link it all of that's going to be linked down in the description below, so feel free to go check it out. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Okay, so urban legends are something that I really enjoy researching, more so when there's something real to them, though. The problem that I've had over the past couple of years, really I've been looking into urban legends and stuff like that, ghost stories, legends around the state of Ohio, for the past 5 years, 6 years, realistically, ever since probably about 2016, 2017, even before that, I dabbled in, I loved the history, I loved the ghost stories. I used to believe in ghosts, and so I'd read these ghost stories online and be like, man, that's so cool, I want to go out and check that out. But the more I've been looking into them, especially over the past year for the channel, for the Ohio Legends and Tales series, the more I've found that a lot of these legends are just that. There's no substance to them at all. Alternatively, I found some kind of creepy stories that don't have a legend around them, that nobody really talks about. There's nothing creepy associated with them. There's a lot of times that I found that the reality is crazier than the fiction when it comes to some of the stories. If you remember the Hatchet Man video, if you watched that one, I think I released it last August, September, sometime in there. That video was a perfect example of one that the actual history was creepier than the legend itself. The legend was a way to get kids out to a certain location so that they could be freaked out a little bit and scare their friends and that kind of stuff. But the actual story was just insane with twists and turns. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, is why do we spend so much time building up fake legends when the reality is much creepier? And I think some of it has to do with, we want to believe in an afterlife. We want to believe that, the end of our lives is not the end of it all, that there's something beyond that. And ghost stories lend some credence to that. But the problem with ghost stories, especially true ghost stories, when it comes time to actually test those things out, they fall flat. So I think a lot of it has to do with us as humans. We're trying to come up with a way to make sense of things, a way to explain things. But also I think a lot of it has to do with people trying to get some recognition or get something out there, pull a prank on people, build something big that, a legend that can live on past them, especially when you're younger. There was times when I was younger that I always thought, how cool would it be if I made up a legend and people were sharing that legend down the road, you know, if it blew up and grew out of control. Looking at it now, I think to myself, boy, that would have been horrible. Because once the genie's out of the bottle, you can't get it back in. Once people start believing it's real, it's hard to overcome that. You know, some of the stuff that I've researched, there's a tale from when I was a kid. And my mom used to take us out and we would go ghost hunting. You know, she got the Haunted Ohio books when they came out in the 90s. My mom was all over those things. And local legends and that kind of stuff. So she would take us out and we would jump in the car and we'd go out and check out some of these legends. And one of the legends that I remember very, very vividly was a legend of, I think it was called Sarah's Grave, if I remember correctly, the name of it. Now, the actual legend itself, there was actually two of them. And there's multiple versions. But the big one now, or the big one back then, was that Sarah was a witch who lived up near Mount Vernon, Ohio, and her husband had either caught her cheating or gotten mad at her for one reason or another and chopped her head off. Then they said, well, you know, and they buried the head. He buried the head in one place, the body in another, and you could drive up there, and if you drove in a certain spot late at night, you would see the headless body of Sarah walking down the street looking for her head. There was a kind of offshoot of that, which I think sometimes got mixed up with a little girl being at the center of the story, and the story going that basically her house had caught fire. They'd gotten her, and you know, her mother and father and stuff had gotten her and her siblings out, but she remembered her doll was in the house, and she ran back in to go get her doll and wound up dying in the fire. It basically went, you know, if you go out to a certain bridge, you leave a doll in the middle of the road, you turn off the headlights, you say, Susie, it was Susie was the name of the girl. Susie, I've got your doll, and turn the headlights back on, and there would be a little girl standing there holding onto the doll. Now, neither of those were ever anything that we ever actually experienced, even though we did go to the locations. But the reason I bring them up is because the more I've dug into those legends now, the more I can see that there's not even a bit of history behind them. The closest thing I could find was the location for Susie's house was essentially in the same area that it looks like there was an old pioneer road. And now, today, it's a dirt road. But it was an old pioneer road. And the theory is that a family lost a child along the route and buried her alongside the road, because back then, if you were heading west, you know, this is back, I'm talking the 1700s, early 1800s, if you were heading west, you didn't stop. You know, if somebody died, you buried them alongside the road and you kept going. And so the theory is that there was maybe a situation where somebody was buried there, a little girl, and the story kind of sprung out of that. I don't know for sure. There's no real history to kind of lean into with it. And now we have so much more access to things. Now that a lot of these old books and old things are being put online and digitized, we have newspapers online and digitized, we have all this stuff where you can actually go and research things. And I think in the transition from the pre-internet age to the internet age, there was this period of time where there was a lot of stuff just being thrown out there. And these stories got spread around once they got online and they started becoming believed. By the time we got to where we are today, where you could where it's much easier to kind of research things and determine whether or not a story is true, it's too late. Too many people already believe it and just take it for face value. So the lesson in all of this, and what I really want to get across as I'm researching and working on these Ohio Legends and Tales stories that are going to be coming out over the next few months, I'm going to share the stories. I'm going to share the history that I can actually find. If I can't find any history, I'll let you guys know. But there will also be stories that you might be able to find or come across that I don't share in the Ohio Legends and Tales series, because of the fact that either they are, you know, there's some situations where things are on private property now or where I can't get out to, but also there's going to be situations where a story is just so blatantly made up that there's not anything that I can add to it, other than to say, nope, that's completely made up. If it's a big enough story, I'm going to try and share the legend itself and then talk about why it's not true. But it's these kind of things that I worry sometimes because of what I've seen out of people when their beliefs are challenged, when something is challenged, when they strongly believe something to be true. I've had people get mad at me for some of my prior Legends and Tales videos because they didn't want to accept what I was saying was true, even when I have the documentation to back it up. And that's the biggest thing, is I want you guys to know, if I'm wrong on something, if you find something where you can, a document or something that shows that I was wrong about something in a Legends and Tales video, show it to me and I'll correct it. But don't get mad because something that you believed turned out to not be true, because honestly, most things on the internet are not true. Regardless of what we want to tell ourselves, most things on the internet are not true. And there's stories out there, there's entire websites built up around these legends, around these ghost stories, I know because I've spent hundreds, thousands of hours on those websites, reading stories, learning about the history, trying to figure things out and sort through the mess. I, in fact, had my own thing posted, and I don't think the website's even up anymore, but I had a story posted on one of those sites from a place that I used to work as a security guard, which I shared that story in a prior video. I sent the story into this website. There was no vetting. They just put it up on the website. And that was the way it was in the early 2000s, the late 90s, early 2000s, with message boards and forums and stuff like that, is people would just submit a story and it would get posted to the website. And that was back then the kind of the equivalent of going viral became, is essentially you put it up and as soon as it got posted to a website that you knew got thousands of visitors, you were famous at that point, even if nobody knew exactly who had written the story. And so keep that in mind over the next several months as I get more into the hard legends and tales stuff, because I've got a lot of time on my hands right now to work on this stuff. And I know I've been filling a lot of time lately with cemetery chats and some photography stuff. I want to lean heavily into the legend and tale stuff along with the photography stuff. And now that I actually have time to do it, that's the stuff that I love to do. Now that I actually have time to do it, I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to focus hard on it. And I want to bring you guys the best and the most accurate stuff that I can possibly bring you. I want to reiterate, I've got Patreon and merch. Both of those are linked in the description. If you enjoyed this video, if you want to see more stuff, hit the like button first of all, so that it gets spread around, because YouTube's kind of weird. And then subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And leave me a comment down below and let me know, is there any history or is there any legends that you had heard maybe at some point in your life that turned out to not be true, or you found out later that weren't true, or maybe legends that you still think might be true, but maybe you've looked into them a little bit or haven't looked in, and maybe there's something I could look into. If it's in the Ohio area especially, drop it down in the comments section. But that being said, I want to thank you all for watching. I'm going to leave a video up here. Fred's doing his own thing. I'm concerned for him. His mental well-being is a little bit off lately, but maybe we'll talk about that another time. So I'll leave his recommendation up here. Hopefully it's a good one. Everybody have a great rest of your day. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.